Hey guys, tonight we're about to travel back to a time more confusing than a TikTok dance tutorial, Imperial China. But not the cool, glittering palace part. No, I'm talking about the real stuff: peasants, endless bureaucracy, and tea that might actually kill you. So go ahead and do me a favor, like the video, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you're doing right now, because let's face it, this is way more interesting than whatever else you had planned. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for some gentle white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet in. Who knows what's lurking in that imaginary ancient Chinese dirt floor? Alright, let's get serious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in Imperial China? Would you be stuck in a rice paddy, fighting off swarms of mosquitoes with nothing but a straw hat? Could you survive a 12-hour workday in the fields, all while dodging Emperor's spies, looking for any excuse to throw you in jail? What about when the Emperor just decides to send your whole village off to war? Or when your government job involves writing on bamboo for a living? I'm talking about a time when public restrooms were essentially pits of doom, and your dinner could be a boiling pot of mystery meat. Now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the Tang Dynasty, China. The year is 800. You're poor, covered in dirt, and there's probably a bureaucrat coming for you with a massive pile of paperwork. Enjoy. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, because that's when everyone starts their day in Imperial China. No alarms, just the sharp stench of sweat and rice. The rooster hasn't even gotten the memo yet, but there you are, scrambling to get dressed in your plain, unflattering robe. No modern alarm clock, no soothing sound of birds chirping, just the cacophony of your neighbors yelling, "Get to work, you lazy peasant." The sun hasn't even thought about rising, but somehow you're already sweating. Your eyes flutter open, and it's still pitch dark outside. You've barely managed to open your eyes before your foot hits something, probably a rat or your younger sibling who's also waking up. It doesn't matter, they're used to it, just like you are. You stretch if you're lucky, and before you even realize what's happening, you're up and moving, because, well, there's no time to waste. You think, well, what happened to those nice lazy mornings when I could sleep until 9 a.m. and have a coffee in peace? Well, that wasn't an option in Imperial China. Nice doesn't even exist yet. You don't get to ease into your morning. You must wake up now and do something productive, whether that's slaving away in the fields or picking up the slack for someone else's chores. If you're working in the rice fields, it's all about muddy feet and a sense of doom. If you're in the city, well, your neighbors are probably banging on the walls, shouting for you to hurry up and start sweeping up the dust that you didn't even know was there. And heaven forbid you forget to do something, because that's when the Emperor's spies might show up to inspect your little existence. Getting dressed is another whole ordeal. No, you don't have the luxury of throwing on your favorite pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. Instead, you're putting on a scratchy robe, probably the same one you've worn for the last 5 years, because clothing is expensive, and nothing about this morning is going to make you feel good about yourself. You glance at your reflection in the murky water outside your hut, and it hits you. You look like an extra in a period drama where everyone's been cast for their ability to look miserable. The worst part? No mirrors. So if you've got dirt on your face, you're stuck with it. No one can tell you're a walking disaster until the whole village notices. Great. Now it's time to face breakfast. If you're feeling especially adventurous, you might go for a nice hot bowl of congee, rice porridge. It's essentially the same consistency as glue, with a bit of flavor that could generously be called meh. You can top it with pickled vegetables if you're lucky, but even that feels like a cruel joke. There's no coffee, no cereal, no eggs or bacon to soften the morning blow. Just bland rice mush that you have to force yourself to swallow, like it's the most boring and tasteless challenge you've ever faced in your life. So much for being a morning person. As the day begins, so does the relentless pressure. Everyone's rushing to work. They don't even wait for the sun to come up before demanding you get to it. You're standing at the rice paddies, knee-deep in water and mud, not even allowed to look up to enjoy the sunrise. Forget about the peace and tranquility you once imagined a morning could hold. Now it's all about hard labor, your sweat pouring down your back, the sound of sickle blades cutting through the rice stalks, and the occasional scream as someone accidentally steps into something much worse than mud. Your stomach growls because you've barely had time to eat, and it's only getting worse from here. Your day might not even give you a break for lunch. If you're lucky, you'll get a small bowl of rice or vegetables, but that's usually eaten in silence while you continue to work, because there's no such thing as a leisurely lunch. Someone else is always watching, ensuring that your every movement serves the emperor's needs, or the village's needs, or your family's needs. You're just a cog in an endless wheel, and if you pause for even a second, someone will make sure to remind you that the wheel doesn't stop turning. By now, the day's heat has settled in. It's the sun beating down like an angry god. There's no modern air conditioning, no fancy hats to keep you cool. You're stuck with a sweat-drenched, wide-brimmed hat that's already heavy with moisture. And as if on cue, the flies are out in full force, buzzing around, mocking your every move. The smell of rice, sweat, and maybe a bit of manure fills the air, and you can't even escape it, because the village is so cramped that even stepping outside doesn't offer any relief. You can't run away. You can't take a nap. It's like being trapped in a never-ending loop of discomfort. And yet, as the day drags on, you can't help but wonder how people did this every day. This brutal, relentless routine that goes on and on with no end in sight. The hardest part? No one's even giving you a chance to complain. Complaining would be an act of rebellion, and we all know what happens to rebels. It's the kind of world where just getting through the day feels like an accomplishment, except in the eyes of the emperor, you're just one of many. In fact, your suffering is probably as inconsequential as the rice you're trying to harvest. So congratulations, you've made it through another day in Imperial China. It's a little like working in a medieval office, except with more mud and fewer coffee breaks. Let's just hope that tomorrow brings something other than sweat, dirt, and an endless to-do list. All right, it's time for breakfast. But instead of eggs and toast, imagine this: a bowl of congee, a rice porridge that's basically a sad, watery mess. And if you're lucky, you might get a pinch of salt. Ever tried eating something that's more liquid than solid and makes you question your life choices? That's breakfast in Imperial China. Forget about coffee, too. Just pure, undiluted disappointment to start your day. You drag yourself out of bed. By now, you're getting really good at this morning grogginess routine, and shuffle to the cooking pot. What's on the menu? Oh, just a giant vat of rice that's been simmering for hours, and now looks like it's ready to make you regret every single food decision you've ever made. This isn't the kind of breakfast that fuels your day. It's the kind of breakfast that makes you wonder if you really need to survive at all. The congee has the consistency of a bad soup you'd try to avoid on a sick day. It's less of a meal and more of an emergency rations situation. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll find a scrap of pickled vegetable floating in the mix, but that's a rarity. Your stomach does a little dance of dread as you stare at it, knowing that this might be the highlight of your day's food intake. And speaking of luck, forget about the luxury of milk, sugar, or butter. No sweeteners here, no crispy toast. You might be able to scrape together a few grains of leftover rice from yesterday, but you won't find anything that could possibly bring you joy. If you're a very lucky peasant, you might get a spoonful of salt sprinkled on top, like it's some kind of prize. Salt, the most valuable thing in your diet right now, which should tell you everything you need to know about the time period. You'll be washing down that rice porridge with what's essentially tepid water. Maybe it's rainwater, maybe it's from the well. Either way, it's a game of don't ask, don't tell when it comes to the quality. Now let's talk about the sound of breakfast. If you're in a crowded village, you're not eating in peace. You've got the neighbor yelling at their children for knocking over the rice bucket, the pig snorting in the corner, and the distinct sound of someone else's stomach growling louder than your own. You sit there, spooning your congee into your mouth like a trained robot, while your brain is already counting down the seconds until you can escape this breakfast nightmare. Ever tried eating when you're not even sure if your stomach wants to cooperate? It's kind of like forcing yourself to drink a glass of water when you're already drowning in it. By now, your taste buds have given up. You try to tell yourself that it's better than nothing. And let's be real, nothing is actually a possibility here. The congee does its best to fight back, an assault on your senses that's less comforting warmth and more please stop. But you soldier through. After all, there's work to do. The sun is barely up, but here you are, eating the equivalent of what your pet hamster might nibble on if it ran out of its fancy pellets. You think about how, in another life, you'd be devouring an omelet with some crispy bacon, sipping on fresh orange juice. But nope. That's just a fantasy that you'll have to wait for in your next reincarnation. Now imagine being a child in this scenario. You're watching your parents choke down their breakfast, and in between sips of watered down congee, you look at your own bowl with a sinking feeling. It's the kind of meal that makes you question your entire existence. You wonder if maybe, just maybe, the Emperor's Palace has a better breakfast spread, where congee is replaced with something resembling actual food, like eggs or even fruits. You could never imagine having options when it comes to breakfast. Here, breakfast is about survival, not enjoyment. But let's not get too carried away. Your breakfast isn't even the worst part of the day. In fact, it's kind of the calm before the storm. If you think eating congee is bad, just wait until you have to spend the next 12 hours in the rice fields, working your hands raw while barely finding time to take a breath. The congee? That's the high point of your day. Everything after that is just a downhill struggle. The food you eat doesn't fuel you. It just keeps you from collapsing completely. And now, as you finish that final sad spoonful, you realize that this meal, which was supposed to start your day, was really just a reminder of your place in the world. No luxuries here, no indulgences, just the harsh, unavoidable reality of survival. You're going to need more than just rice to get through today, and that's something you'll have to figure out as you stumble into the next part of your day, still hungry and hopelessly unenthused. But hey, at least you made it through breakfast, right? one step at a time. So, my friend, one step at a time. Welcome to the world of Imperial Chinese bureaucracy, where paper is worth more than your life. You think filling out tax forms is bad? Imagine filling out everything in triplicate, on bamboo, with a brush that feels like it's on its last legs. You'd better have a good excuse for everything you do, because someone in the next village is probably writing it down for the emperor's review. And if you misplace any paperwork, that's a one-way ticket to a lifetime of heavy labor in a faraway mine. Hope you didn't just sneeze. In this world, organization isn't just a suggestion, it's a way of life, and it's all built on piles of paperwork that seem to multiply as if they have a life of their own. First off, you've got to start your day with the most satisfying of all morning rituals, gathering up your brushes, your inkstone, and a stack of bamboo scrolls that will make you wish for a job that requires no writing at all. It's not like you can just jot down notes in a notebook. No, this is the age of bureaucracy, where everything has to be written on bamboo or thin sheets of paper. And the ink? You're using that old, runny black stuff that barely stays on the page. Not ideal for an easy morning. Now let's talk about the real kicker, the forms. There's paperwork for everything. There's a form to get to work, a form to tell someone you're working, and, if you're lucky, another form to tell someone that you're officially done working. But don't even think about cutting corners. If you forget to write a single character or accidentally smear ink on your scroll, that's grounds for punishment. And heaven forbid you run out of ink halfway through. So that's a direct ticket to the official office, where they'll reprimand you by making you copy out entire government records by hand as a punishment. And it's not like they've got fancy pens either, just a brush that might as well be a stick you found on the ground, not the most conducive to careful writing. Everything you do is scrutinized by the all-seeing, ever-watchful eye of your local government official, who, let's be honest, is probably just a guy who's even more terrified of his job than you are. This man spends his days crossing off things from a list that was created by someone who didn't even bother to ask whether it made sense. He will remind you to fill out every form in triplicate. Yes, triplicate. One for you, one for the emperor's records, and one to send to the next village over, because why not have 3 copies? And he'll do so while giving you the, "What are you, a barbarian?" look, which is as frightening as it is utterly unhelpful. This official is essentially a paper pusher, and not the kind who just stamps things for fun. He's the kind who judges you for not filling out your forms in perfect calligraphy. But that's not the worst part. No, the real fun begins when you realize that someone has been watching you the whole time. All those little scribbles you make, they're probably being read by the emperor's officials, who are looking for any excuse to haul you in for misconduct. Did you accidentally write your name too big? Off with your head. Did you leave a tiny space between words? Well, now you've offended the entire imperial administration, and you're probably getting shipped off to the countryside to work in the salt mines. That's how much they care about paper, because it's all about control. You're a cog in a much bigger wheel, and that wheel is powered by paperwork. Forget about the idea of personal freedom. You can forget that the moment you pick up your first scroll. What's even better? The fact that if your form doesn't make it to the right person at the right time, or if it's even a minute late, you get to face the wrath of your local official, who's now irritated that you couldn't get your paperwork together. There's a lot of "I told you so," and "how could you mess this up?" followed by a journey to the emperor's court, where you'll be judged by people who don't care that your penmanship looks like a toddler in a windstorm. even worse, the chances of you ever finding anything you need in your own paperwork are slim. There's a good chance that any important record you need is buried under stacks of other scrolls that are never filed in the right place. It's like a giant game of Where's Waldo, except Waldo is your job, and finding him could mean your death sentence. And just when you think you've found it, your form will probably be out of date or have the wrong seal, or it will get lost in transit to some remote village that's never heard of you. It's bureaucracy at its finest, endless, frustrating, and entirely out of your control. Just when you think you're getting ahead, the wheel of paper turns and you're back at square one. At the end of the day, as you finally put down your brush, you're left staring at a pile of scrolls that look like it could reach the moon. You think, well, at least I'm not stuck in a mine for a lifetime. But then you remember you could be. Time to get to work. Maybe you're toiling away in a rice field, or maybe you're toiling away in a field of mud. Either way, it's miserable. Workdays last for hours, with little more than the rhythmic sound of a water buffalo complaining as your background music. Forget about lunch breaks or hydration. It's more about don't get caught daydreaming, or you'll be punished. But hey, at least you can take a break to dodge a wandering bureaucrat or avoid stepping on a pile of horse manure. Good luck. You get out there, barely awake, with the sun still trying to figure out if it wants to rise or not. But forget about easing into your morning. That luxury doesn't exist in the world of Imperial China. You're already waist deep in mud, shoving your shovel into the earth while the sun is still blinking in disbelief. All around you, the field stretches out like a sea of green with no end in sight. The only thing that breaks the monotony is the occasional moo of a water buffalo, who's probably just as unhappy as you are. But that's fine. We all have to live with a little disappointment, right? The buffalo's moans are the only rhythm in your 12-hour symphony of suffering. And let's be clear, this is no modern cushy farm work. This is hardcore, ancient, backbreaking labor. The fields are yours to tend, and the rice doesn't care if you're tired. In fact, it's actively trying to make you wish for a different life. You're bent over in the dirt, sweating under the weight of your work, while the rice plants don't seem to appreciate the effort. Every time you try to stand up and stretch, your lower back protests, like it's signing a petition to send you to an early grave. But you can't take a break. You'll be spotted by the overseer. And heaven forbid you give in to that moment of pure human weakness and look up at the sky. If you're not actually doing something at all times, someone will report you. One moment of laziness, and you'll be marked as unfit for duty. No one wants that title on their resume. Then there's the heat. It's as if the sun and the earth conspired to turn you into a baked potato. The air is thick, the sweat runs down your face, and your clothes stick to you like a second skin, saturated in the kind of moisture you can't scrub off. You're surrounded by the earthy smell of wet soil, mixed with the faintly nauseating scent of rotting leaves. Don't forget the flies. They've been with you since the first minute of work and are now treating your body like a free buffet. They buzz around your face, land on your hands, your clothes, your sweat, probably even your soul. Every time you swat one away, another takes its place, a relentless reminder that you're stuck here for hours with no escape. And if you think you're getting a break for lunch, think again. Forget about sitting down with a nice sandwich. Lunch in Imperial China is a concept as foreign as a day off. You're lucky if you get a handful of rice to munch on while you're still knee-deep in mud. You might try to nibble on a bit of pickled vegetable, but that's about the extent of your culinary pleasure. Oh, and don't think for a second that hydration is an option. No, the water you drink is probably from the same stream that runs through the field, meaning you're literally drinking the same liquid that's been used to irrigate the crops you're now standing in. The freshness of that water is debatable at best. And the worst part, the overseers. You can feel their eyes on you, just waiting for a mistake. They stroll by, pacing in their wide-brimmed hats, scribbling on their bamboo scrolls. It doesn't matter how hard you're working. If they think you're not putting in enough effort, you'll get an earful. It's like being on a reality show where the judges are looking for the smallest excuse to eliminate you. The Rice Field Games, starring you as the miserable contestant. If you don't move fast enough, or if your shovel goes too deep into the soil, they'll mark you down. It's like living in a constant state of fear where no one tells you exactly how to succeed, but everyone's quick to point out when you fail. The hours drag on. Every step feels heavier than the last, and your legs are beginning to feel like they're made of cement. The heat makes everything seem slower, like you're wading through molasses instead of mud. When you look up, the horizon seems so far away, like the end of the field is just a cruel mirage. It's a never-ending loop of pain and exhaustion, with only brief moments of escape when you dare to look at the clouds for a split second. But somehow, after what feels like an eternity, the workday does end. Your muscles are screaming at you, your clothes are soaked through with sweat, and you've probably got blisters in places you didn't even know existed. You stumble home, knowing full well you'll be back at it again tomorrow. So, yeah, miserable bliss might be a stretch, but at least you're alive, and that's something, right? The best part? Tomorrow, you get to do it all over again. Because in Imperial China, the concept of rest is as foreign as a nice cold drink on a hot day. But hey, at least the water buffalo's still moaning with you. Let's talk about the bathroom situation. Forget about your fancy modern toilets. Your bathroom is essentially a hole in the ground that everyone shares. You want privacy? Maybe you'll get to stand next to a wall. Maybe not. It's like using a porta-potty in the middle of a festival, but without any of the fun or convenience. And if you miss your aim, it's basically considered a crime against decency. The good news? You won't ever need to worry about running out of toilet paper because, surprise, that doesn't exist yet. You wake up in the morning, bleary-eyed and already regretting the rice porridge you ate for breakfast. Your stomach is gurgling in that distinctly unhappy way that says, if you don't find a bathroom soon, we'll be making some very unpleasant decisions. But in Imperial China, that's not a problem. It's a lifestyle. There's no nice little private restroom with a seat or a soft, fluffy roll of toilet paper to help you along. No, you get the pleasure of waddling your way to the public latrine, which in true communal spirit serves everyone. The moment you approach the restroom, you realize there's no such thing as personal space. The bathroom is essentially an open-air pit with maybe a few walls for privacy, if you're lucky. If not, you're basically standing shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, exchanging pleasantries while performing the most personal of human functions. That's right, no doors, no individual stalls. If you need to go, you're going to do it in front of half the village. And don't even think about waiting for your turn, because if you hesitate, you'll be pushed aside by someone else who's had enough of waiting. As you crouch down, because that's what you do in ancient China, there are no seats. you can't help but notice that the smell is something else. The air is thick with the scent of, well, everything: human waste, the fermented smell of the surrounding area, and the odd waft of incense trying to mask the horror. The ground beneath you is slippery with mud and filth, a reminder that the bathroom is less about hygiene and more about surviving long enough to get through the day. If you're lucky, you'll have a stick or a wooden plank to balance on, but that's about as comfortable as it gets. It's basically a waiting game to see if you can finish without slipping, getting splashed, or accidentally stepping in something that may or may not be human. And just when you think you've gotten used to this whole situation, you realize there's no toilet paper. You read that right. No soft, safe paper to clean yourself up. Instead, there might be some rough straw or a handful of leaves if you're lucky. It's not quite the luxury of modern bathroom tissue, more like your worst nightmare wrapped in nature's worst materials. You'll pray that you can find something that won't leave you itching for days, but the chances are slim. And if you don't have anything to wipe with, well, too bad. You'll have to make do with whatever's around, or maybe just hope that the dirt can take care of the problem. The worst part? The occasional bathroom assistant who's just there to keep things moving. Imagine someone standing by the latrine, staring at you with a look that's equal parts judgment and boredom. You don't know what this person's role is, but they make you feel like you've entered the public restroom hall of shame. The pressure's on. Do your business fast and get out of there before someone else starts lining up behind you. It's a race, a marathon of desperation, where the finish line is just a pile of dirt and regret. Then there's the inevitable socializing. Yes, the public latrine is where everyone gathers, and there's no escaping the awkwardness of it all. The guy who works next to you in the rice fields might be standing right next to you, discussing how the crops are doing, all while you're both in the midst of your business. There's no avoiding it. You just have to grin and bear it while you're both forced into this bizarre communal experience. There's no taking a moment to yourself. The boundaries between you, your personal space, and your neighbors have been completely obliterated by the hole in the ground that somehow has more power than any of your privacy could ever hope for. And when you're done, well, just when you think you've escaped the nightmare, the worst part kicks in. You now have to leave without making eye contact, trying to maintain some sense of dignity in a place where dignity went to die long ago. Your clothes smell of human waste. The air feels thick with the remnants of your experience, and you wonder why you're even alive after that whole ordeal. And yet, somehow, you do it all again the next day. Because, hey, there's no choice. In Imperial China, the bathroom situation wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a test of your resilience. Every time you stepped into the public latrine, you had to ask yourself, can I survive this? The answer, of course, it was yes, but only because you had no other choice. And when you leave the latrine, you'll feel a sense of relief, but also the heavy, undeniable truth that you've just been part of the world's most uncomfortable, awkward, and downright unhygienic social gathering. Congratulations, you've survived yet another day in Imperial China. All right, let's get into hygiene, or the complete lack of it. Bathing? Well, that's a luxury, my friend. If you're lucky enough to get a wash, it's likely to involve a bucket of lukewarm water and a cloth that's seen more sweat than an Olympic sprinter, and you'll need to share it with your whole family. Ever tried scrubbing yourself with cold water when your skin is already covered in dirt? Good luck. Plus, there's the constant danger of lice, fleas, and a whole lot of unpleasant odors. Modern shampoo has nothing on this ancient hair treatment. Let's start with the process, or what passes for one in Imperial China. Picture this. You've been working out in the fields all day, covered in mud, sweat, and whatever else nature has decided to throw at you. Your skin is the color of clay, and you can practically feel the dirt working its way into your pores. You know you should probably clean up, but here's the thing. You don't really have the luxury of private bathrooms. So the first step in your bath involves dragging a wooden bucket of water into your home, probably from a well that's located about a mile away. The water is, at best, lukewarm, probably because it's been sitting outside, exposed to the elements. It's less refreshing shower and more water that barely passes for liquid. Now, if you're lucky, you'll get to use a cloth, but don't expect a fluffy towel or a nice loofah. You get a rag that's been passed around the entire family, a cloth that's probably seen better days, but is still somehow expected to scrub away years of accumulated grime. You dip it into the water, and if you're lucky, it's not the kind of lukewarm that feels like it's been sitting out under the sun all afternoon. Instead, you scrub, rinse, and repeat, except the water you're using has probably been sitting around too long too, and isn't exactly clean anymore. If you've ever tried to clean your skin with water that's already dirty, you'll know the feeling. It's less refreshing cleanse and more dirt smearing ceremony. What you're doing here isn't a bath, it's a test of endurance. You're scrubbing yourself, but no matter how hard you try, you know you'll never be clean. There's no hot water to open up your pores, no bubbles to soothe your tired muscles. It's all about getting the bare minimum done, just enough to keep you from stinking up the entire village. But the real kicker, after you've used the cloth on your body, you'll have to let the same cloth dry, only to be reused the next day. That means the rag, now covered in all your filth, will be passed around like some kind of shared communal relic. Hygiene? Who needs it? But wait, let's talk about the hair. Modern shampoo is a beautiful thing, isn't it? The silky smoothness, the fresh scent, the satisfying lather. Well, that luxury doesn't exist in Imperial China. Instead, you're left with nothing. No shampoo, no conditioner, no fancy hair care products, just the same water you use to wash your body. The good news? You can probably get away with running a comb through your hair. The bad news? That's the least of your worries. Because no matter how much you scrub your scalp with that rough cloth, there's always the very real threat of lice, and fleas, and dirt, of course. So by the time you've finished your bath, your hair is still greasy, and let's be honest, it probably smells worse than before. The worst part? You're not even sure if that's from the water, or the fact that the entire village shares the same bathwater. So now you've got dirty hair, itchy skin, and the feeling that no matter how hard you try, you'll never be truly clean. You might even have a few new lice friends who've set up camp in your scalp, ready to move in for the long haul. But let's talk about the real issue, odors. Because when you're living in a world where you don't bathe properly, you don't just smell a little funky, you smell. And there's no deodorant here to save you. There's no nice antiperspirant that can cover up the fact that you've been sweating in a field all day, or that your hair hasn't been washed in weeks. The smell clings to you, settles into your clothes, and becomes a part of who you are. It's like the world's worst cologne, a mixture of sweat, dirt, and, well, whatever else you've been exposed to. If you're really unlucky, the smell of human waste also adds to the lovely bouquet of odors, because public latrines are, of course, a part of your daily life. The whole village is basically one giant, unwashed mass of people who just live in their own funk. At this point, you might be wondering why you even bother trying to clean yourself. What's the point of all this effort if it doesn't make any real difference? The answer is simple: survival. You've got to at least try to keep up appearances, even if that means scrubbing with dirty water and a cloth that might as well be used for rags. Because in the end, it's not about being clean. It's about being able to show up and do the work, even if you smell like a month-old compost heap. So there you have it. The endless dangers of being too clean, or rather, the endless dangers of trying to be clean in Imperial China. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. You can scrub, you can wash, but the dirt will always find a way back. Welcome to the world where personal hygiene is more about endurance than cleanliness. Socializing in Imperial China is a tricky business. You've got to talk to the right people, but most of the time, you're too busy avoiding getting stabbed in the back by a neighbor. If you're of lower rank, heaven forbid you talk to a noble without the proper title or respect, because if you do, you're probably getting the boot. And if you're really unlucky, you might be getting dragged away by the government officials who like to show up at the worst possible times. It's less, let's hang out, and more, please don't get me into trouble for existing. Let's start with the basics. Who you talk to is more important than what you talk about. In Imperial China, the art of socializing was based on a complex web of hierarchies, and if you weren't at the top, you were constantly navigating a minefield of potential faux pas. The moment you step outside your door, you have to consider your entire village. Is the local noble walking down the street? Better make sure to bow low and pray you don't accidentally step on his foot. If you do, well, at least you can prepare for the worst. The penalty for insulting a noble could be a public flogging, or worse, being dragged off to a labor camp for the next decade. And if that's not enough to keep you on your toes, there are the government officials who are always watching. One wrong move, and they'll consider you suspicious, and that's your ticket to an interrogation. It's like living in a game of social Jenna, where every interaction is one wrong move away from total collapse. Now let's talk about the dreaded small talk. If you think your modern-day awkward encounters are bad, just imagine trying to make polite conversation in a society where everything you say can be used against you. Every word is carefully measured, weighed for its implications. You might think you're just chatting about the weather, but did you forget that your neighbor has just been promoted to a higher rank? Now, your casual comment about the heat might be interpreted as a passive-aggressive jab at his new position, and before you know it, you're locked in an argument that can't be resolved by simply offering an apology. Social dynamics here are about maintaining power and status, and any slip-up, no matter how minor, could send you tumbling down the social ladder. It's not about having fun with friends. It's about surviving without getting demoted, punished, or publicly humiliated. So maybe skip asking someone how their day was, so they might just be offended by the tone of your question. Then there's the absolute minefield that is talking to someone in authority. When you approach someone of a higher rank, whether it's a local official or a wealthy merchant, the stakes are high. You'd better get their title right, because misusing a title is basically an open invitation for them to look down their nose at you, or worse, report you for disrespect. You see, in Imperial China, titles and proper forms of address were everything. A slip of the tongue could mean the difference between a friendly exchange and a one-way ticket to a very awkward and potentially life-altering conversation with the emperor's officials. Heaven forbid you greet someone with a title that doesn't match their rank, because the whole village will hear about it, and your reputation will be tarnished forever. Imagine living in a world where even a casual greeting could be the start of your downfall. It's enough to make you think twice before even leaving your home. Now add the pressure of the government's ever-watchful eye. You're not just dealing with your neighbors or local shopkeepers. You've got to be aware of government officials who are lurking in the background ready to pounce. These officials can show up at the worst possible times, and sometimes they'll be hanging around just to see how people interact, looking for any excuse to stir up trouble. If they notice you speaking to someone of a higher rank in what they deem an inappropriate manner, you could find yourself whisked away for questioning. You might just be having a chat with a fellow peasant, but it's no guarantee the officials won't consider it a covert act of rebellion. And let's not forget the potential spies, those helpful folks who are always right there, observing your every move. You never know who's an informant, so that casual conversation with your neighbor, it might just end up being the one that gets reported. And once it's reported, there's no going back. Your life could be in the hands of someone who has nothing better to do than watch and judge. In a society where social interactions are so fraught with danger, it's no wonder most people just keep to themselves. The idea of hanging out with friends doesn't exist in this world. Instead, it's about survival. Your best bet: stick to the basic yes sir or no madam and keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself, don't make jokes, and certainly don't speak out of turn. It's the kind of life where any misstep can mean disaster, and the social ladder is a structure that's built to keep you down if you're not careful. In the end, socializing in Imperial China isn't really about connection or friendship. It's more about not getting into trouble and maybe, just maybe, getting through the day without ending up on the bad side of someone more powerful than you. It's less, let's go grab a drink, and more, please don't get me into trouble for existing. So next time you feel awkward in a conversation, just be thankful you're not living in a society where your words could cost you your freedom, or worse. Family life in Imperial China was all about space, or the complete lack of it. You're living in a tiny one-room hut with your entire extended family. Your grandmother is snoring, your little brother is trying to eat the last of the rice, and your cousin is already fighting over the bucket of water. Everyone is so close, you could probably hear them breathing in their sleep. And of course, no one has ever heard of personal space, because personal space is a luxury for the rich. Everyone sleeps in a pile, like you're some kind of human pillow fort. Now, let's paint the picture a little more clearly. Imagine waking up in the morning to find you've spent the night practically on top of your cousin, who's either kicked you in the ribs during the night or is drooling on your arm. The floor of your home isn't exactly carpeted in comfort, and instead, it's hard-packed earth, and the bed is a straw mat that feels more like it was designed to test your tolerance for discomfort. There's no mattress here, just a few thin blankets that seem to have been stitched together from the leftover scraps of other people's homes. At least you can count on your grandma's snoring to drown out any awkward conversations, which is both a blessing and a curse when you realize everyone else is awake too. Speaking of your grandmother, she's the one hogging all the space. She's snoring away in the corner, taking up what little space there is left for you to maneuver. You try to get comfortable, but it's impossible because everyone's limbs are intertwined like some sort of human jigsaw puzzle. Forget about getting up to stretch. Every time you move, you risk stepping on your cousin's foot or getting your foot tangled up with your little brother's. There's no personal space bubble here, just a constant stream of elbows, knees, and general discomfort. Privacy? That's just a word you read about in books, not something you'll ever experience in the cramped quarters of your hut. Now, breakfast? You think it's hard to eat a meal with a noisy family in a cramped space? Try eating when you've got your little brother sitting across from you, already eyeing the last bowl of rice like it's a trophy. You don't even get to enjoy a peaceful morning meal. Your sibling is trying to sneak bites. Your cousin is demanding that they get the last of the salted vegetables. And your grandmother, who's finally awake, starts yelling at everyone for making too much noise. Oh, and don't even think about getting to the water first. The water bucket is the family's most coveted possession, and everyone's vying for a sip. You might find yourself locked in a fierce battle over the last drop, your cousin trying to pass you the bucket as if it were a sacred offering. There's no waiting your turn here. It's survival of the fittest when it comes to the morning routine. The concept of personal belongings might as well be a myth. Everyone shares everything. Your clothing is probably hand-me-downs from older siblings, your food is passed around like a shared responsibility, and your personal space is just a vague notion of something that might exist if your family ever moves out. If you're lucky, your parents might have a tiny corner of the hut where they can sit, but don't expect privacy. In fact, there's a good chance that everyone in the family knows exactly what you're doing at any given moment. That moment when you want to have a private conversation with someone, forget it. You might as well be performing in a live-action drama with your entire family as the audience, offering unsolicited opinions on everything you say. The sharing extends to chores as well. Everyone has a job to do, and no one gets a break. While you're out in the fields, your siblings are probably scrambling to do everything else, sweeping the dirt floor, tending to the fire, and making sure the livestock doesn't wander off. If you're lucky enough to have any time to yourself, it's usually spent either avoiding getting assigned extra chores or trying to escape the constant din of family chatter. At the end of the day, you might think you'll get some peace and quiet, but nope. You're right back where you started, crammed into your corner of the hut, fighting for space as everyone else settles in for the night. If you're lucky, you might get a few minutes of solitude when everyone else falls asleep. But considering the way your grandmother snores and your cousin kicks, that's probably a stretch. There's a certain camaraderie that comes with living in such close quarters, sure, but that doesn't make it any less exhausting. You can't walk 5 feet without bumping into someone, and you certainly can't enjoy a moment of peace without someone else interrupting it. Personal space? That's a concept so foreign in this little hut that it might as well be a fairy tale. Instead, you live and breathe by the rhythm of the family. Every day is a test of patience, of whether you can survive another 24 hours without losing your mind or your last scrap of rice to a sibling who's always one step ahead of you. But somehow, you do survive, because in Imperial China, you don't really have a choice. You make it work, you learn to share, and you survive the chaos of family life by sticking together, whether you like it or not. Imagine living in a world where the most powerful man in the universe doesn't even know your name, but you still have to obey his every command. That's your life under the Emperor. He's off in his palatial palace, sipping on tea and writing poetry while you're out here slaving away in the fields. But if he does notice you, it's usually because he's decided he wants to make your life miserable. And good luck trying to argue with the emperor. It's not like he's going to take your side when the local officials come knocking. The emperor is a distant, mythical figure who's not remotely concerned with your daily struggles. He doesn't care that you woke up at 4 a.m., ready to face another day of grueling work. He's not losing sleep over the fact that you haven't had a proper bath in weeks. To him, you're a speck in a grand, sprawling empire, one of millions who exist to serve his whims. He sits in his palace, surrounded by luxury, gilded furniture, delicious feasts, servants ready to cater to his every need, while you're trudging through mud and rice paddies, hoping the day's work will be over before the sun sets. Your life is a constant cycle of labor, hunger, and exhaustion. But the emperor? He's writing poetry and indulging in delicacies that you wouldn't even dream of tasting. There's no connection, no sense of empathy. His life is like a fantasy, and yours? Well, it's just reality. The thing is, the emperor's presence looms over you, even though he's physically far away. You may never set foot in his palace, but you're constantly aware of his power and influence. His commands shape every aspect of your life, from the taxes you pay to the way you're expected to conduct yourself. Every action you take has the potential to be scrutinized by one of his officials or spies. The emperor, in his infinite detachment, has set the rules, and you, well, you don't get to question them. The rules of the empire are as rigid as the stones that pave the emperor's roads, and you are just one tiny, insignificant part of this grand machine. And while the emperor might not be concerned with you personally, rest assured the local officials are. They are the ones who enforce the emperor's commands with terrifying precision. If the emperor decides that taxes should be increased, it's the local officials who come knocking on your door to collect the money. If the emperor demands that the army be strengthened, it's your village that will be forced to send able-bodied men to fight, regardless of your personal opinion on the matter. These officials might not care about your well-being, but they certainly care about following the emperor's directives. If you're lucky, you'll just get a visit from an official with a list of demands. If you're unlucky, you might find yourself being dragged to the emperor's court, accused of some minor infraction that's been blown out of proportion. Either way, your life is entirely in the hands of people who've never met you and probably wouldn't care if you disappeared. And let's not forget that when the emperor does notice you, it's usually because he's decided that your existence is an inconvenience. Well, imagine being dragged to the court for something as trivial as an accidental slip of the tongue in front of an official. Maybe you said something that could be interpreted as disrespecting the emperor, even though you were just talking about the weather. Suddenly, you find yourself in front of the emperor's representatives, explaining yourself for something you didn't even mean. Do you think the emperor is going to listen to your side? No. He's probably sipping his tea, blissfully unaware of your plight. The officials? They're the ones who decide your fate, and chances are their interpretation of events won't be in your favor. It's not so much that the emperor is malicious. He's just too busy enjoying his life to worry about the people he's ruling over. And when you do get punished for some trivial error, you don't even think about protesting. There's no trial by jury, no second chances. The emperor's word is law, and you are nothing more than a cog in the vast machine of his empire. Try to argue, and you'll just end up making things worse. At best, You'll be sent away to work in a far-off labor camp. At worst, well, let's just say you don't want to find out what happens when you become the emperor's unfortunate subject. So you go about your life, doing your best to stay out of trouble, because at the end of the day, the emperor's power is absolute. You might never meet him, you might never even hear his voice, but his presence hangs over everything you do. He is the ultimate authority, a figure whose existence shapes your every decision. Yet he remains a stranger, a distant, unknowable figure who will never understand your struggles, your pain, or your sacrifice. And that's the most frustrating part, knowing that the man whose every whim controls your life will never even acknowledge your existence. Death in Imperial China is a mixed bag. Some people are lucky enough to die of old age in their sleep. But if you're unlucky enough to fall victim to war, disease, or just plain bad luck, you're probably going out with a bang, or a bang of misery. If you die in battle, you might get a hero's burial, but if you die from disease, you'll be tossed into the mass grave with everyone else. Ever wondered what it's like to die while being just another statistic? Well, in ancient China, that was basically the norm. Let's talk about the most glamorous way to go, in battle. The warrior's death. If you're lucky enough to die on the battlefield, at least you've got the potential for some honor. Your death might actually be celebrated, maybe even turned into a heroic tale that's passed down for generations. You'll get a proper burial, to complete with rituals to honor your sacrifice, and your family can hold their heads high because, well, you didn't just go quietly. No, you went out fighting. But here's the thing, getting to that point is far from glamorous. The war itself is a grueling affair, with soldiers spending days without food or sleep, fighting endless battles against enemies who might outnumber them 10 to 1. When you die in battle, there's no telling if you'll actually die heroically, with your sword raised high, or if you'll just collapse from exhaustion and blood loss in the middle of a chaotic skirmish. Your hero's death is often just a random stroke of fate. 1 second, you're fighting for glory. The next, you're staring at the dirt, wondering if anyone will remember your name. But if you're lucky, you might get a hero's funeral, and that's where the story ends, for you at least. Your family gets to bury you with all the respect and ceremony your status allows. They light incense and pray for your soul. But even then, the process is less peaceful passing and more, let's get this over with before we all get caught in another war. In a world where soldiers are as disposable as grain, you can imagine that heroism doesn't have quite the impact that it does today. Now let's move on to the less glamorous, more common way to die, disease. Ah yes, the silent killer. It could strike at any moment, and there's very little you can do about it. In a time where medicine is rudimentary at best, a simple infection could take you down in a matter of days. Plague? Well, now you're looking at something that could wipe out entire villages. And death by disease is particularly cruel because it's slow. You don't get the hero's burial, you don't get the glorious last stand. Instead, you're just another statistic in an ever-growing pile of corpses. If you die from disease, your body might be tossed into a mass grave like everyone else who couldn't fight off whatever bacteria or virus decided to invade your system. Imagine being part of a sea of anonymous bodies, all piled together without ceremony, no names to mark who you were. You're just part of the process, a fleeting figure in a world that moves on without you. No one remembers you. You're forgotten as soon as you're buried, replaced by the next wave of death that comes rolling in. And even worse, death by disease wasn't exactly peaceful. Imagine lying in your small, overcrowded hut, sick and feverish, while your family watches helplessly as you wither away. There's no modern medicine to ease your suffering, just the same lukewarm water and half-hearted herbal remedies that might do more harm than good. If you're lucky, you might have a loved one by your side, but more often than not, you're alone, waiting for your body to give out, the grim reality that your time has come dawning with each painful breath. The worst part? Disease doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're a noble, a peasant, or a soldier. It takes everyone. No status, no wealth, no power can protect you. If the gods decide it's your time, you'll be as vulnerable as anyone else. And while the rich might have the luxury of better food or cleaner living conditions, they too are susceptible to the same illnesses that ravage the poor. It's just a matter of time before the disease finds its way into every corner of the empire. But what if you're one of the unlucky ones who dies in the middle of everyday life without any pomp or circumstance? You might be struck down by a random accident, or perhaps starve due to a poor harvest. Either way, your death will probably go unnoticed unless it causes a ripple effect for your family. After all, the emperor has no time to notice your passing, and the local officials will be more concerned with what to do about your missing tax payments than with offering condolences. Your family will bury you quietly, without ceremony. Life goes on, and you become just another forgotten soul in the annals of history. So death in Imperial China is a mixed bag. There's the chance of heroism, but it's far more likely that you'll die quietly, without anyone caring about your life or your death. In a world where survival is a daily battle, death is just one more thing that happens, usually without much ceremony. But the real irony? Death might be the ultimate escape, but even in death, you might not get the peace and dignity you think you deserve. It's a cruel world, and for many, the most peaceful part of life is the one they'll never experience: old age. So tonight, as you settle into your soft bed, surrounded by the comforts of modern life, like indoor plumbing and a fridge full of food, take a moment to reflect on the resilience of those who lived in Imperial China. They worked the land from dawn to dusk, endured unimaginable hardships, and still managed to survive another day. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but they kept going because, well, what else could they do? And while their world was full of dirt, sweat, and constant struggle, it's also a reminder of how far we've come. So maybe, just maybe, whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors, the ones who survived the lice, the endless paperwork, and the kind of community living that makes your family gatherings look like a vacation. Because honestly, after all that, your biggest complaint is probably just the fact that the Wi-Fi went out for 5 minutes. Because history may be gross, terrifying, and sometimes hilarious in its absurdity, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and let's face it, kind of ridiculous. They found ways to keep going, even when it seemed like there was no way out. And who knows, maybe that's something we can all take with us into tomorrow. So as you lay your head down tonight, remember, you're living in a time of luxury by comparison. And hey, at least you don't have to fight off lice before you can even think about getting some sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be far less crowded than the huts of Imperial China.